Hi friends, it's me Bee from Bee in the Studio. Welcome to my very first ever quilt along for my very first ever quilt pattern, the Made of Starstuffs Quilt. Today this video is going to be like a mini class of how I sew through the Sawtooth Star block in the quilt. I figured this is my first quilt along, so my thought was the most helpful thing would be if I could sew along with you. Well, the most helpful thing would be if I could fly to your house and sew in your studio with you, but since that's not going to work for all of you who are sewing this quilt, I decided a little mini class where I walk through how I sew the quilt together would be a good way to get started and help you out. So I'm going to do the Sawtooth Star this week, and then next week I will be doing the Pinwheel Star, and then I will also have an additional video every week for the next, my plan's 6 weeks of me sewing. I'm going to make a quilt and sew as well, so I'm going to do a little studio vlog each week for you so you can see my progress on the quilt, which will hopefully inspire you to keep going too. So we're going to get started with the Sawtooth Star, like I said. If you still have questions after watching this video, feel free to reach out to me. Instagram, I'm Bee in the Studio there. My website's beeinthestudio.com, which you can get the Made of Starstuffs quilt pattern there as well. Or you can leave a comment below here as well, and I will hopefully get back to you, or if it's a question that's asked enough, I'll go ahead and make another video so that you have more detail and I can cover the things you need help with. So this is going to be in all the colors of the cover quilt, so it looks the same as the pattern, and yeah, let's get going. Let's get started cutting on the cutting table. Okay, I'm going to start with the cutting. I left the cutting instructions in this pattern really simple because I tend to get really lost in patterns when they tell me how many widths of fabric to cut and then the number of subcuts. It's too much for my brain. So when I'm cutting for a quilt, whether one of my own patterns or someone else's, I look at the size of the blocks in the pattern, and then I cut a width of fabric that height, and then I subcut as many blocks in that size across as I can, if that makes sense. So for instance, in this pattern, I know I need a 5-inch block, so I'm gonna cut a width of fabric at 5 inches. I've already squared up this edge, so I can just do a quick cut on here. So I'm gonna cut it 5 inches, and then because this is the thing that I get really nervous about, is once you take your ruler off, though I put spray starch on the fabric when I'm pressing it to make sure it's nice and flat before I start cutting, I worry that if I'm stacking these with the fabric strips that they're going to get off slightly, and then I'm not going to have the most accurate cuts. So what I do is I cut the strip with the fabric, put the ruler on here to hold this edge in place for the next cut, and then I start subcutting the strip. So I'm going to do my 5-inch cuts here. Ooh, that's close to that other edge. And then cut the selvage off. And then how I keep track of the width of fabric instead of doing a number, I know, for instance, in this, since I have my fabric about 42 inches wide, I will get 8 5-inch squares across. So I've already cut one width of fabric, so there's one. And then as I start on this one, I'm going to turn it so that I know that's a second width of fabric cut. So let's cut these real quick. The other thing you can do if you want to speed up your cutting, if you want to do more than one stack, well, this is technically 2 because the fabric's folded in half, but if you want to cut more than that and stack cut, what you can do is take that other end of the fabric and fold it over so that you're cutting 2 widths of fabrics at the same time and do the same thing. So I'm going to get my last one here. Okay, so whoops, that is not straight. Okay. So you can see, now I know I have 1 width of fabric strip and 2 width of fabric strips. And as I continue to cut here, this stays nice and even because I'm not moving it. And I just cut from here. And then I do it the opposite direction. So I do square again and then diamond again and square again and diamond again as I go through my fabric until I have the right number of squares that I need for the pattern. So hopefully that might be helpful to you too. Okay, so I have all the pieces of fabric that we need cut out and ready to go for the pattern. I just wanted to share, I included this little fun Meet Your Blocks sheet for the pattern so that if you're working with scraps or you're doing a bundle, you have half yards or quarter yard bundle, it's easy to see these are the pieces that go to this block, so you can kind of work from it on your own. That's what I like in a pattern, because I feel like half the time I have no idea what pieces I'm cutting, so I tried to be really clear with that. So the first step in the pattern is for half square triangles, which though they're not my favorite block to make, I do really love how they look in this pattern. So the first step in that is to go ahead and draw a line from corner to corner on a couple of these squares. So I have my sew line pencil. It's got lots of different colors in it. It's pink and white and black. This is my favorite because I always have a lead that'll show up on no matter what color fabric I have. And so you can do a line from corner to corner, or I will show you my time-saving trick so that you don't have to stand there and mark all the pieces for the half square triangle. So let's hop over to my sewing machine and I will show you what I do. Okay, so we're at my sewing machine, and what I use is this diagonal seam tape from Cluck Cluck Sew. And it's got 3 lines on it that you can see. There's a center line and then 2 1/4-inch lines. And you just line it up on your sewing machine. It's really easy on mine because it has a 1/4-inch mark. And then when you're sewing, you use the tape instead of drawing a line on your fabric, and that makes it so you can do the 1/4-inch away from the center corner to corner line that you should, or that it says to draw in the pattern, without actually having to draw the line. So I think it works best when you can have a little bit more coming out like this. This extension table came with my machine, and you can see I have it all the way just right up to my 1/4-inch line, and then all the way off the edge here. The white table that the sewing machine is on is actually designed for machines, and it has a cutout underneath where the machine is currently that you can move down so that your sewing machine's flush with the table. And I had it like that for a while, but I actually used the seam tape enough that I ended up putting it up so it's at the top position, and then continuing to just use my extension table, because otherwise if I don't have it with the extension table, it stops here, and then that's not really enough room to be as helpful. So I will show you how to use it. So if you want it dead center, you line up your corners with the red line, or you can do it a 1/4-inch either way from the center line. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm looking all the way back here and line it up. I'm just going to go ahead and get sewing here, and then I'll show you. Holding my finger on there the whole time, you can see, can you still see that? Not really. That point is lined up on that line. And then just do it on the other side. Same thing on the other side. And it's easy for me, I just flip it around if I'm doing one. Otherwise I chain piece and keep going, so that's what I normally do. But see, we'll do it again. Just line it up on that line here, and you can watch it go. And there it goes. Perfectly 1/4-inch from the center seam every time. So, all right, let's take this over and get it cut at the cutting table. Okay, so I have my sewn half square triangle here, and I am just going to show you how I like to square up the half square triangles. In my pattern, I have everything oversized so that there's room to square it up, so you always have a nice, perfectly square, or as perfect as you can get, least square half square triangle for the pattern. So this is the ruler I use for half square triangles. It's the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer from New Leaf Stitches, and I will go ahead and put the link for this in the description as well. And I don't think I mentioned that on the Cluck Cluck Sew tape, but I'll put all the stuff I use in the description below, so if you think you'd be interested, you can get it. You can find where to get it. This is my favorite one. I've tried other ones, and this is the one that I keep coming back to. The only thing is, this is for whole inches, and I have one for half inches, and I think They have one for like 1/4 inch and maybe 1/8 inch. I don't know. They have multiple sizes, and I didn't realize that at first. They sell them in a 2-pack, and I bought them individually. So if I was buying them again, I would buy the 2-pack because I now have the other one too. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So I actually use it to cut them in half too. There's a little stitch line right here. And so I line up my stitch line on that stitch line and then just cut down the center to cut it in half. And then I will show you. It's very handy. Now obviously this is before I press the square. I square it up. Some people, you know, everybody's different. This is what I like to do. So you just line up your stitch line on this little stitch line, and you can see maybe, it's maybe a little hard to see, but there's a little gray line that shows where your seam allowance is. And then I just hold on to it nice and firm, and boom, one side and the other. Cut those off, and then it's even got these nice little slots in here so that you can trim off the extra triangle that they call the dog ear part. So see that? We have a perfectly trimmed half square triangle ready to be pressed open. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this other one so you can see me do it again. And I think everybody kind of has their own way that they like to do half square triangles, but this has been my favorite. So do it one more time, trim it there, get those slots. Now we have 2 perfect and ready to press half square triangles. So let's hop over to my pressing station. Okay, so we have our half square triangles ready to go. I already have these 2 pressed open. We're going to press these 2. My favorite trick with pressing is whatever direction you're pressing the seam towards. So in this case, we need to press it towards this gray fabric so that it's turned towards that fabric in the end. Here, I can show you. Like that, so it's pressed that direction. So whatever fabric you need to press towards, if you put that one on top, you will always press the seam the correct direction, which it's pretty sad how often I press my seams the wrong direction when I'm writing my, well, always, but when I'm writing my own patterns, then it's really bad. But this always helps me get them going the right direction. So the only thing with these half square triangles when you're pressing is because you've sewn across the bias here, you want to make sure that as you press it open, you just kind of gently press. Just kind of let the iron do the work and aren't like, because if you do, it can kind of, do you like my growling? I realized that was ridiculous. I've never ironed like that, but you know. So if you press it too hard, it can kind of warp this, the 2 triangles of the half square triangle. So if you're concerned about it, you can use, I use Best Press. There's lots of other spray starches you can use, and that can just kind of help you keep it nice and square, and it can help when you're sewing it into your full block and quilt because it'll keep it solid and not quite as shifty with that bias. So just take care when you're pressing and try not to warp the corner out at all. So I've now got all 4 of my half square triangles ready to go. So now we just move on to the flying geese. So let's head back to the cutting table and we will start on that block. Okay, so we have finished our half square triangles. That part's done, and this is the center of the block, and now we just need to do our flying geese. I like to do, so the pattern does flying geese both 4 at a time and single at a time. So this one's 4 at a time. So what I'm on the half square triangles, though I don't mark, I do end up marking on these since you overlap the 2 in the center here. I have these already marked here. You overlap in the center here like this. So since you're sewing all the way across and it's a much bigger square, I like to make sure the lines really line up in the center, so I mark. So I have these guys already marked, but I'm going to go ahead and mark this one now. I need this pink mat. Pink's my favorite, so it's 100% worth it, but if I don't put something underneath it, I get all these little black marks on my mat. So simple, just line up corner to corner for marking and just draw a line across. And now we are ready, so we'll put these together over at the sewing machine. This is one of the times that I actually do pin, and my pins are over at the sewing machine. So let's take these over there and get this one sewn together. So we'll start these flying geese by getting this nice and lined up here. I just want to square up the corners, square up the little squares to the big square, and line up those lines in the center. So I'm going to do that real quick. The first time I did flying geese, I was like, is this really supposed to overlap in the center here? But it is, it's part of the magic of 4 at a time. So if this is the first time you've done that, it will work. Don't worry about the overlap. So this, again, like I said, I like to mark it because then I can line up those points nice and evenly. And this is one of the times that I pin. I tend not to pin as much as possible, but I like to have a nice solid foundation because you'll see as it sews, there's a lot of ability for it to shift. So why risk having it's a lot less time to pin it and take the pin out than rip anything out. So, all right, let's go ahead and sew this. Get my thread under my foot there since it's wildly not. Oh, okay, come on thread. There we go. Oh, see, that's already flopped backwards, so I'm glad it was pinned. All right, so get this on here and get going. And just sew right next to that 1/4 inch. My foot, this is a 1/4 inch on here, if you can see that. So just a 1/4 inch away from that line. Just go all the way across. And yes, I do sew over the pins. And now, see, now I'm able to keep track on this corner if I want to, but that rest of it you can't, so I'm glad I marked it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those pins real quick, and then we'll flip this guy around. Take this one out too. Do the same thing, but on the other side. All right, there we go. Let's take this over to the cutting table and get this guy cut in half. So this 4 at a time flying geese is kind of like a giant half square triangle. You're going to go through the same process and go ahead and cut this guy in half. If you don't have one of these handles for your ruler, if you have a big one like this, I really recommend it. I started sewing when I was, well, like 10. I used to use my mom's sewing machine, but not well. And I officially learned from a friend when I was about 15. And I put off getting one of these until my late 30s. And I tell you, I love it so much, and I'm not sure how I ever lived without it. So I can put the link in the description below too. So you just line this up. You can either do it, line it up on that center line you drew, or my ruler. Most rulers have a little 1/4 inch line that you can line up with one of your sewn lines if you sewed fairly accurately. And just cut that in half. This is my favorite part of these 4 at a time flying geese, because now you've created 2 little hearts like that. So I'm going to go ahead and press these, which I don't think you need to see, and I'll meet you back at my sewing machine and we'll sew the rest of this together. Okay, so I pressed these 2 heart pieces out, and now we're going to sew these squares onto them. So it's the same kind of idea as in the first step. You're going to set the square on like this, line it up in the corner. Maybe. Ooh, it's very movie today. Okay, and then you want to have the point of the triangle through the center of the heart. Now I've marked on these again, but honestly, they're small enough that I could have done it without marking. So it's, you know, your personal preference. You can see as I put it in here how it lines up. You could definitely go without the line, but I just did it anyway. So, all right, so we'll get these sewn. I'm going to go ahead and do both of them. Just going to do 1/4 inch away from the center, and then I'm just going to grab the next one. See, this is another case where I don't pin, if I didn't already just say that, because I can kind of keep my hand on it long enough to get it through the machine, and it's not as big of a deal. Okay, so this one, put that through. I'll do these going the other way. See, again, you can keep that point there if that's what you want to do. I'm honestly watching that more than the center line, but you know, it's all personal preference and whatever you want to do. Whatever works best for you. Cut these off, and then floppy flying geese. The first time I did this, I think I said, yeah, again, you want the overlap. The first time I did this style of 4 at a time flying geese, I was like, how could this possibly work? But suddenly, at the end, like magic, you have 2 connected flying geese on each of these, and it's super cool. So let's go get these cut and we will get them pressed and we will be ready to sew the whole block together. Okay, so we have our 2 sets of flying geese, 2 sets of 2 flying geese for our 4 at a time flying geese. So at this point, we're going to cut them apart just like we did with the half square triangles and the larger part of this flying geese steps. Okay, words are escaping me. So I'm just going to line up that 1/4 inch on the sew line, and there we go. We have our 2 flying geese. So I don't trim the sides off until I've pressed them. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one too, and then we'll go ahead and go press these at my pressing table. And we'll come back and trim those little dog ears off at the end. So let's go ahead and go get these pressed open. Okay, so we have all our flying geese here, and I decided to go ahead and show you how to press because it's just like on the half square triangles. You kind of just want to gently let the iron do the work and not press that too much, or you can warp the corner. You've sewn across the bias so it's fairly stable, but you can still kind of, even that one I just kind of pulled out a little bit. So you just want to do them as gently as possible and not warp these, or warp them as little as possible if you can help it. So I'm just going to press these open, and then we'll go ahead back over to the cutting table, back and forth, and we'll start assembling. We'll cut off the dog ears here. Whoopsies, I'm talking and not paying attention. We'll fix that, maybe. It's going to be difficult since I'm filming it. So after this, we'll go trim these little dog ears off. That's these little triangle bits. They call them dog ears. And we will start to assemble the block, which is very exciting. So I will meet you back over at the cutting table. All right, well, since I was at my pressing station, my neighbors started up with the weed whacker, which is making the puppy very upset. So hopefully we can get through this without puppy barking, but no promises, just grumbles for now, if you can hear that. All right, so I've already trimmed these guys up, and honestly, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to squaring up blocks. Shh, don't let anybody know, but this looks pretty even, so all I do is just trim off these dog ears, and I don't even use a ruler. I can just kind of eyeball and trim them off. You can see my little pile over here. So we have these all done, so let's go ahead and get started assembling the whole block. So how I like to do it is I like to lay it out so that it's easy for me to grab pieces from, and I can see, make sure I have it laid out and going the right direction. For whatever reason, when I sewed through this, the like many times that I've sewed it so far, I haven't been able to get these blocks in right. So, okay, she's leaving the room. We'll see if it stays quiet. So these guys I kept flipping, and so I find if I can kind of lay the block out like this, then it's really easy for me to just grab one piece at a time and go, okay, well, if it's like this, then it has to be like that to sew it, and then sew that edge and keep it straight so I don't have to rip a bunch of pieces out, which is what I've had to do in the past. So let's go ahead and take these over to the sewing machine, and I think I'll sew through them with you, and then we will be almost done. I think we'll just kind of we'll have to assemble the strips then. So I'll meet you back. I don't know where I'll meet you at that point, but I'll figure it out as I go. So I'll see you at the sewing machine. I've brought you back over to my pressing station here because I wanted to show you, just like I said earlier, on the half square triangles, we know we needed to press towards this gray fabric, so we put the gray fabric on top, and then it perfectly pressed the seam. The same thing works as you start to piece together, so I know that the seam needs to press towards this half square triangle, so it's on top. I press it open, and voila, it is pressed the correct direction. So I already got that one over there. I'll show you on the center too. This is a good time if you like to use spray starch, or I use Best Press, to just give these a little bit of a mist, and that can help make it so the pieces are have a little more rigidity as you're sewing it together and won't move around so much. It can lead to nicer piecing, more matched up seams, but it's up to you. So on this one, I know I need to press towards the center, so I put the center on top and press this way. Sometimes when it's in the center, I find I just go from the back and press that way, because I feel like this way it can fold the seam kind of wonky easier when it's a big center like that. But that one pressed just fine, so see how this one looks. We'll just check it. Those look good too. So let's get this block pieced together. Let's head back to the sewing machine, and we are almost done. So in general, I try and pin as little as possible to save myself the time, but this is one of the cases where I do pin. I just like to, this one, the Sawtooth Star, I love because it only has 2 seams that you have to match up there and there, and so it's not a ton, but I just like to make sure everything kind of lines up when I'm piecing, so that there's a less likelihood that I have to rip anything out. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this. I pin, you know, fairly minimally. I guess you could do less than I do even, but I just like to kind of hold it, you know, where the seams meet, and then the ends, because I tend to speed through the end and they tend to wonk off. Anyway, I used to work on an industrial machine. I started sewing bags, and so speed is my thing. So in this machine does like 15 or 1600 stitches a second, or not a second, that would be insane, a minute. So that's part of why I really like it. All right, so I'm pinned in the center there, these 3 little spots. I'm pinning the center of the flying geese there. Get this side too, just because I can eyeball it and see that's kind of wanting to move a little. And then I'm just, since that's already down a little, I'm going to pin here and on the other side too. And then I will be ready to sew this together. So let me get that last one. Okay, so if we get this in here. Now, like I said, I started with bag making, so I don't back tack when I'm piecing the smaller bits, but on the finished block, I do like to back tack, just because I've had seams come out a little bit in the past, and so it's a lot less work to do a second back tacking there than have to put the whole thing back in the machine. So I'm just going to sew on here. I didn't tell you on the other flying geese, because I was speed sewing, but in this case I do what I was taught is you want to sew 1 stitch back from the point of the flying geese. So you probably can't see that because it's under the machine, but the point of the flying geese, just 1 stitch back towards the side of the fabric, and that gives you a perfect point on the flying geese, or should help make a perfect point. So I'm just going to sew across here. Yes, I sew over my pins. There's that little back tack there. And there we go. So that looks like it's pretty good. We can pull these pins out and give it a check real quick. See, I think it's worth these few seconds of pinning to not have to rip anything out, or less likelihood of ripping things out. Yep, that lines up great there. Perfect little flying geese point there, and pretty lined up there. So I have the other side here I need to pin and sew. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, speed it up, and then we are done. And I will meet you, well, pretty much done. We have to press the final seams. So I will sew this together, and I will meet you back at my pressing station to finish this block up. All right, so we are just about done with this. I know I need to press these seams towards the center, and I'm going to go ahead and do that from the back. Look at how nice this is looking. Whoops, as I mess up the pressing here. Even the back looks great. So I'm just going to run this seam here, press it. You can do that same trick I showed you in a couple other videos and press from the front with the center on top so that it goes that direction, but sometimes when it's a big seam across like this, I like to just go ahead and press it from the back, and then I'll give it a final touch up on the front. So this is also another good time to use spray starch or like my best press, just so that when you're piecing the whole top together, it is a little bit firmer. You don't have to worry about things shifting as you sew. I don't know, it's up to you. You do what works for you. That's why I'm doing this video, so you can kind of see how I do it, but then whatever techniques work for you, those are the best ones for you to use. So just gonna give this final little press. One of my favorite things about, whoopsies, the iron righted itself, even though I was holding onto it. One of my favorite things about this block is how nice and big this center is. I'm just gonna check these back seams look good. I just bought a long arm a couple months ago, and so I'm very excited. I feel like you could do some really cool quilting in here, and then in the little bits even. Or if you have a really beautiful large scale print you want to feature, this would be a really nice spot for that. So I can't wait to see what you guys come up with your quilts. So let's see, that's it for now. I am gonna show you my face again and we will wrap up this video. Alright, that's it for our little mini Sawtooth Star class. I will be posting next week the pinwheel star. I'll do a little mini class on that one too that I'll post. In the meantime, I have a blog post that I go through the Sawtooth Star in depth. It's on my website, beinthestudio.com, and the pattern, the Star Stuffs pattern, is available there too. If you're making along with me this week and you're posting on social media, make sure and use the hashtag Starstuffs Quilt or Starstuffs QAL, and I will search for you and find you, and I'd love to feature you on my Instagram. So let's see, that's it. Make sure and watch out for the little studio vlog that I'm making this week too, where I start sewing through my quilt, and I will see you in the next mini class next week. Bye.